in terms of the concept, it is, but this is different. So Rachel, so how you doing? Good?
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? How do you started on web design, web development? What got you here to the US and all that good stuff?
So I started with with sort of in tech, with the idea that I would be a software engineer when I finished high school, because I always like enjoyed doing like very simple programming in class in school that we got taught. So I went to study software engineering, and I ended up dropping out of that degree because it didn't appeal to me very much. Like it was very back-end focused, like very Java focused, and I just sort of wasn't interested in that. So I decided I would like leave programming, and I took a break and did some other study. I thought I'd be in human resources or whatever, but I wasn't happy with that either. And I ended up coming back to web design, the idea that I would do web design. Because the first time around I tried to study, I didn't realize that front end was a job. Like this is like 2004, so I didn't really, it wasn't really a job back then. It was sort of more like web designers and back end developers. But then when I thought I'd be a web designer, I went back to school to study that, and I discovered there that there was like this whole world of JavaScript and Flash at the time, where you could program things, but it was for the front end. And then I realized that's what I needed to do, like visual, but also programming. And I got into working professionally because I'd done some Flash at school, and there was a advertising agency looking for like a Flash banner makers, and I applied for that job just to make Flash ads basically, and that was my first advertising agency job. And then I spent the next couple of years working in advertising, just working my way through from Flash through to JavaScript, from building like ads to like entire websites for campaigns. And that path actually led me to taking a job in the USA. So that's how I moved here. I got offered a job with an agency called Active Theory, who are based here in LA, and they're known for doing very sort of futuristic and like highly animated websites to promote brands. So that's why I took a job with them.
That was the thing back then. That was the thing back then. Flash, it was pretty. Animation was.
It's sort of the
hardcore stuff.
Yeah, the stuff that Active Theory build. It's obviously it's all JavaScript now because Flash doesn't work on a lot of devices anymore. But the stuff that we're doing is very reminiscent of what people were doing with Flash websites like 3 or 4 years ago. But they were doing it with like HTML5 technology. So that's why I joined them, because that was exactly the sort of work I was interested in. So I spent 2 years with Active Theory in LA, and then I got offered the job at CodePen. So I started working for them in January of this year. So that's me.
Nice. And well, that's awesome. I did some Flash myself too, and I'm sure a lot of us here had something to do with that. So how did you end up in CodePen with the CodePen folks?
I was a CodePen user. Probably about the time I started working for Active Theory, I started also getting really into using CodePen and just making demos. And I just really loved the product. Like, I eventually met Chris Coyer at a conference that we were both speaking at, and actually met Tim Sabat at the same conference, and I just told them how much I liked CodePen, and we became friends. And then when they got their funding and they were looking to do a round of hiring, Chris just Skyped me and he said, "Hey, how would you feel about working for CodePen?" And I'd always had in my head like that's like my dream job. Like I never said anything to him. Yeah, like I never said anything to him about it. He sort of just approached me with it, and I was like, "Oh my God, are you serious?" Like, of course, like.
I know. Like, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it just blew my mind at the time. So that was really cool. I mean, they were obviously aware with what I could do because I'd been making stuff on CodePen. So like they could see that I could use JavaScript and CSS and stuff, and that's why they felt confident in hiring me to actually work there.
Wi-Fi. She's moving.
Hello?
Oh, there you are. You froze there for a second. Sorry.
Yeah, I couldn't. I think.
What was that last part?
Oh, the last part.
Wait, hold on. You're breaking up a little. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. There you go. Okay. Yeah, just the last bit of what the story was.
Oh yeah, the guys I think felt pretty confident in hiring me just because they saw I could write, CSS and JavaScript based off the pens I made on CodePen. So they were like, "Oh, we can see that you can code." So
So basically CodePen worked for you to get a job. It happened to be a CodePen.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And I actually had from my CodePen I had people contacting me all the time for work. It's just initial contact, so it doesn't mean very much, but I've had emails from like every big startup in Silicon Valley like saying, "Hey, do you want to like get on a call or have an interview?" Because of the stuff I put on CodePen. So a lot of all of everything except for the CodePen offer was like I just didn't pay attention to it because I was like very happy where I was. CodePen was like the only place I would consider leaving my last job for. So yeah, so it has actually helped a lot in helping me find a better place for my career.
Right, that's awesome. And so, what got you into animating SVGs and doing such awesome designs and bring them to life like the pens you have?
I just really, I think it comes from my Flash background, as in I always enjoyed the animated aspect of Flash, basically, and the things that people would create with Flash. I love looking at motion graphics work from like more like traditional animators using After Effects and stuff. That really appeals to me. So I'll take something that they've made and see if I can do a similar effect using web technologies, because that's what I know. Like I know how to do JavaScript, so I don't know how to use After Effects. So I just sort of like am inspired by these amazing motion designers who like make this stuff, which is probably too complex for web tech to handle, but I try and like do something similar, usually inspired off what I've seen someone else do.
No, okay, cool. So you're gonna show us today a little bit of what happens in your head, and how do you bring it up in a pen and bring it to life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. Okay, see that there's a webcam where you can see all of us here. So hey, Rachel, right there.
Hi.
There you go. Alrighty, cool. So you want to show us then?
Yeah, sure. I'll just screen share, I guess. That's how we do it, eh?
Yep. Yeah, the Flash days were a mark for all of us here.
Yeah.
Man, I was a Flash teacher. Yeah, I had a blast with Flash, man. I gotta say, I mean, it's a lot of the things we see today are, as Rachel said, inspiration for what people do today. So regardless of the technology, yeah.
Can you guys see CodePen right now? Is that?
Yep, we can see your screen.
Okay, cool. All right. So just as I was saying before, like usually the ideas I have come from something I've seen, like usually like I'll often go to sites like Creative Block or From Up North or I think it's From Up North. And I'll like go to their sort of resources that show like motion graphics work. And I wish I could have, this is the thing, I wish I could show you the link to what inspired this particular pen, but I honestly can't remember where it's from or where I found it. I just remember seeing it one day and I was like, ooh, I got to make something like that. And then the vision of it like burned into my brain, and now I can't remember where it came from, which is a shame. Basically, I sort of made this last night because often with my pens, there's sort of like there's kind of like a tedious aspect to a lot of them, where if I were to sit here and like do it in front of you, it'd be so boring. And I very rarely sort of like sit down and just say, I'm going to code a pen now, and like sit down and like code a pen and like do nothing else. Often I'll be like watching Netflix or something, and I'll just have CodePen open and I'll just be like chipping away at it. So sometimes it can take me like 10 hours to do one pen. I'm not coding like that whole time because I'm like watching movies, but I just sort of half-heartedly do this stuff.
Yeah.
So basically with this pen, I'm just gonna because it's hard to. So this is sort of what it ends up like. And basically it came from the inspiration of I think it was like a logo design, and it was like this blocky sort of text, which sort of like morphed into the different letters with this color trails behind it, and I just really liked that. So I usually start with something like that, and I think, okay, well, what would I use to do something similar? And SVG is a pretty good tool for this because it's sort of like these angular shapes, and you need to be able to control the polygons or points. So first I like start with, I know I need these three shapes that I need to like morph from and to. So I like just took just a blocky sort of font that I found on the internet, and I I just saved it out as an image here to trace, and I actually just took the polygon shape here within an SVG. We've got an SVG here, and we've got a polygon, and I actually just traced the points on these shapes. So this is like the really tedious bit that can take time, but because I'm just doing it while I'm like chilling and watching TV, it's not really a big deal. So I just keep putting these points in for the polygon, sorry. And I just keep going until I find the right spot and like trace the shape, and I'll like trace it all the way around. So I'm not doing a very good job of it here right now, but basically I trace that out by just keep adding these points in. And after I've done that, oh, that didn't work. Excuse me. So after I've traced those shapes out, I end up with 3 polygons right here, which are the 3 shapes I'm going to use in this demo. And then the next thing I do is I know I want to like, these points are going to be generated with JavaScript. So I'm just going to take this data that I've collected in the HTML over here in the SVG, and I'm just going to like store that as an array. So that's just like
generated with JS.
Yeah, because I do want these shapes, but I want them to be generated by the JavaScript. So now I know these points, like I've traced them over the object. I know that they are what I want. I just sort of copy these numbers over into an array of arrays, and each of these, so in this polygon string here, the way this works is like x value comma y value over and over again until you have a shape. It's just like drawing out a shape and their coordinates. So I just copy those values over into JavaScript. Again, that's like pretty tedious. So I just skip to this part.
Right. Yeah.
So I have my 3 shapes here. Just one glass of water because I keep coughing. 1 sec.
That's all right. Take your time. I bet that's how Taylor creates his SVGs.
Serious hand animation of SVG right there.
I mean, some people prefer to use like Illustrator or something, and they would draw the polygon out and then sort of export the shape from Illustrator. But I feel like it takes me just as long to do that than it does just to do it by hand in here. So I like doing this by hand, but you totally could just like open up Illustrator and draw your shape out and export it, but then you'd have to sort of like fiddle with that export to make it sit in here the way you want. So I'm like, it's a lot of stuffing around. I'd rather just like stuff around in here rather than dealing with the graphics program. Okay, so I've got like the 3 shapes here, and basically what I want to do now is I just want the 1 polygon, and I actually want to dynamically put those coordinates back into it with JavaScript. So I'm just going to give that an ID.
At this, Rachel, at this point, this is plain vanilla JavaScript that you're using, or are you loading a library or framework or of some sort?
Right now, it's just JavaScript. I will pull in a library to do the tweening for this, but right now I'm just dealing with vanilla JavaScript.
Okay.
So I'm just going to select this polygon here.
Mm-hmm.
What I want to do now is write a function that takes, say, this shape 1's data and creates a string of coordinates that end up being assigned to this polygon as an attribute. So I'm just going to make a function. And it's just going to take the data from shape 1. So I'm just going to iterate through this array.
So can you tell us what is it that your typing means?
Sorry?
Could you tell us what is it that your typing means? Because I'm not a JS person by any
Okay,
means.
cool. Yep.
So
So we don't really need CSS right now. So we have an array here of data in JavaScript, and I want to turn this array of data into that same string that we had over here in our points polygon to draw it.
yeah.
So what I'm doing now is creating a function that takes this array here and it's going to loop through it. So I've created an iterator here, a for loop. It's going to loop through each of these data points and it's going to construct a string which I can then assign to this polygon. So I'm stepping through each item in the array here. And each item is also a smaller array of an X and a Y coordinate. So I'm going to start with an empty string. And then as I go through each item in this array, I'm just going to create, so if you think about the format of our array before was, sorry, of our string before was sort of like X comma Y space X comma Y like this. So that's what we want to construct here.
Okay.
So basically we're going to add to this string first the first item, the X like value here of the item we're dealing with. So we're going to go points plus equals, which is just like concatenating the string, just adding to it. Shape 1 and then I, and then we want item 0 from that item because that's the X value. And then we want to add a comma here, and then we want to add, oops, sorry. Then we want to add the second, the Y value, so that's this Y, oh sorry, 1, because that's the second value, and then we add a space. And then if I run this, we should okay, cool. So that should have created the string. Okay, so I've just opened up the console here, and there's our string. So now we're going to assign it to the points attribute of our polygon, which we selected up here. So polygon.set attribute point, and then our points that.
CodePen introduced that console feature not long ago, right?
Yeah. Yep, that's true. We brought that in, I want to say, like the end of last year or the beginning of this year. So that's the concept. I'm sort of likely to lend towards using debug view when I'm coding, just because I like having the DevTools console open, and like if I go if I open DevTools here, it sort of like gets very small, the space. So I prefer to just have like debug view open in another tab and just switch back between the tabs. But for checking on just like just a string value or whatever, I'll often use this console for that, just because it's like quick. Cool. So now because I've set this on this SVG here, it's now our first shape because I've sort of created it from shape 1. So I know this works. So this is like the way that I'll often build these things. Like I know what I'm moving towards, but I kind of just like to write one little bit at a time, like just take it a step at a time. And this function isn't what it's going to look like in the end, but I still like to just write a function that does the first bit of thing that I want to do, which is make one shape out of the string, and then move on from there. So I know I can make a shape by doing this, by constructing this string and sort of like setting it to the polygon. But what I want to do here is actually start with this shape and then move to the second shape and then move to the third shape. And I want to animate between those shapes. So from experience, I know I can do this because if you bring in if you bring a tweening engine and you assign each of these points in these arrays to like an object, you can tween between those points. And if you are calling like a draw call in an animation loop that is constantly drawing this shape, and you draw it from the object that's being tweened, it will actually like animate the shape. So that's what I'd probably go about doing next. So the first thing I know is that I need this shape to like constantly update based off an object that I use to construct the points in the shape. So first, I basically need an object that I can create this shape from. So we originally wrote this using an array, but I'm actually want to use an object because that's what you use in the tweening engine. So when we get to that, you'll see why. So the first thing I need to do is create an object from this data that I can eventually use to tween. So I'm just going to go create another function here.
No, right here.
You're looking at Google Hangouts. You should have a microphone, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
So I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to loop through this shape, but I'm going to construct an object from the data points. And I'm going to make this object sort of like global to this whole namespace because I'm going to use it in another function. So because I've declared it up here, it means I can use it like within any of these functions within here. They'll all be referencing the same thing. So I'm going to iterate through the shape here again, and I'm going to basically update this object with the values. And this is how I do it, and I'll just, after I do this, I'll just explain what it's doing. So what this does basically takes an object and it like creates it to end up looking like this. So polygon object will end up, after this is finished, it'll read like this. It'll be like x0, 10. Y0, 20, or whatever we're passing through it. So be more like 15, 15, and then 26, and then it'll be x1, um, 194, y1, 26, and so on. And that's what this will create in the end. Okay, so that creates the object. What we want to do here is actually create our string from this object rather than the array from above. So I'm going to update this function now so it actually moves through this polygon object. All right, so first we create the polygon object, and then we generate our string from the polygon object instead. And why we do that might not be clear yet, but you'll be able to see in a bit why I've put it in an object instead of just doing what we were doing before. So we want to make this thing animate, right? The next thing is to create the animation loop that's going to constantly draw this shape over and over again. So I'm just making a function here, and making this a recurring request animation frame loop, which is going to create our animation. It's just going to call itself over and over again. And within that loop, I'm going to draw this shape over and over again. So I'm just going to basically call this for now within this loop. So it's not changing because we're asking it to draw over and over again, but it's just drawing the same shape. We haven't changed it. So what I want to do now is actually like set up the tweening. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Sorry about that. Yeah, we can hear you now.
I don't know why it muted. That's so weird. All right.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
So is everyone like kind of familiar with tween light or like tweening libraries or how they work, or do you want me to just
really,
sort of?
honestly.
Not in this context, no.
Okay, cool. So what tween light is? It's a tweening engine. So
Tween?
yeah, so tweening is like basically it's like to animate something from a position to a position. It's called a tween. So like this guy here is like moving from one spot to the other. That like motion is called a tween. And basically a tweening library is just something that helps you animate something from one position to another without having to write all the code yourself. So the way it works is you can basically you can use this function called tweenlight.to, and you basically hand it an object that you want to tween, and you can pass in the properties you want to tween it to. So say I had an object like that had, say, we'll just say x and y 20. And you had say you had a position, something on screen at that position, and you wanted to move it to like x 50, y 100. You would be able to use this function to sort of pass the original object you wanted to modify, the time. So that's like 1 for 1 second. And then you'd pass in like the new properties that you want to tween it to. And you can put in like timing and delay and like a callback function if you want something to run when it's finished. So that's what this library helps you do, is you just animate things from one position to another. Same thing, it's not just position, you can animate any property like opacity or scale or anything you want to animate. In this case it's position. I want to animate each of these points' position. So considering that I actually want to take this polygon object and I want to pass it into this function to be tweened, so I can do that. But I need to pass in like the second shape that I wanted, this data that I want to tween it to, because I want to like move these points from the state that it's in right now to the new state. So I basically need to just update this function here. Rather than modify our polygon object, I want to make like a new set of points from the array that I give it and return that new set of points as an object. So I'm just going to make a new object here. And instead save these coordinates to this new object and return that object, which means every time I call this create polygon object, it's going to return a new object, but I need, instead of just using shape 1 every time, I want to be able to pass in any shape to this function that I want. So I'm going to pass it in here as a variable, in here. So I'm just going to call it shape, and that's actually going to be this one of these arrays here. So instead of using shape 1, I'll just put in shape because we're going to declare it when we call this function. Alright, so now that function's working. Instead of calling create polygon object in here, in the animate function, I'm going to call it in this tween function. And I'm going to say, just call it new points, because they're the points I want to tween to. New points equals create polygon object, and then pass in the shape that I want to create that object from. And then I want to pass in these new points into this tweening function because I want to tween the polygon object, which is being drawn in our animate function, to the new points. And this isn't working because I need to first declare like what shape the polygon is going to be originally, which is our shape 1. So before I begin animating, I'm just going to set the polygon object to have the points of the first shape. So I'll do the same thing here with our create polygon object function. I'm going to pass in shape 1. Oh, sorry. So shape 1 like that. Okay. So now if I call tween object, sorry, tween polygon, it should animate from one to the other. Does anyone have questions about that? Have I lost anyone, or
Well, if you guys have any questions,
libraries for tween light you have to include.
hold on.
Yeah, she already included tween light. I see the tween light up too. But my question is there a file tween light.js?
So, Mario, could you ask Rachel to show in the pen version set the CDN, which is moving?
Hey, Rachel. They were asking here if you included a library, which you did.
Yeah.
Tween light.
Yeah, it might have been.
Go ahead, sorry.
It might have been when my sound cut out or something. I was talking about that, but.
Could you show us where in the CodePen interface you added the library?
Sure. So I grabbed the link to the script from this CDN.js. So I just copied it from here, and then I just added it in my JavaScript settings here. So in the external JavaScript, I just included the link to this script, and also the easing script that they have with GSAP, because I'm going to actually use an ease for timing. So now, because I've included it here, this function, this tweenlight.to, is available for me to use, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ah, okay, cool. Thank you.
So
I asked her to show us that website, the CDN.
What is that URL for the CDN for
this one? It's cdnjs.com/library/gsap. If you go to GSAP, it refers to the green sock animation. I don't know what the last letter stands for. But right. Yeah, if you go to their website, greensock.com, they also have links to all their scripts, including the CDN.js link. I'm pretty sure it's in their like get started info.
Okay.
Yeah, I think
you
might be in the getting started at. So they'll you can download it here. Also, like another thing you can do if you don't want to use the CDN, I just use it because like people have probably downloaded it from there before, so it's a bit faster if you use the CDN. But you could also just upload. I think I actually have like copies of yeah, like I even have a copy of Tweenlight in my scripts here, because I've uploaded it myself at some point.
Okay.
So you can download those scripts and also like upload them to your assets if you don't want to use the CDN. Like that's if you're a pro user. Sorry, you have the assets. Yeah. So okay. So I've managed to write a function that tweens like from the first shape to the second shape. But what I want to do is keep tweening through these shapes, like from one to the next to the next. So I want to actually like keep calling this tweening function, which creates the tween, over and over again. So what I'm going to do, that sort of says to me, like, okay, I'm going to need to put these three shapes in an array because I want to like iterate through those shapes and then go back to, when I'm finished with them, go back to the beginning. So I'm going to change this. Instead of having three variables here, I'm going to create an array. And this is kind of getting crazy because now I'm creating an array of arrays of arrays. Like we've got like 3 levels of arrays here. Now, because we've already seen like they're 3 separate variables, like it's a bit easier to digest what this is. It's just an array with like 3 arrays within that array.
That's a ton of arrays.
Yeah, it's a lot of arrays.
Like me.
Yeah, it's I love arrays. Like all of my CodePen work is like just messing with for loops and arrays. So once you get in the habit of using them, they sort of become second nature. But it can just take a little while to like mind map what's going on within this data structure here. So just I'm just going to comment here like, so okay.
When you come in through the work, and how do you create one array with a bunch of arrays in there? It's easy to follow along, and that's where that's where's the value of seeing you do it.
Yeah.
Because we can pretty much hear you think.
Yeah.
Will.
And I mean, this is how I do it. Like, I never sort of go. I'll often end up with this like gnarly array of arrays. But as you saw, like I don't just sit here and like type that out. I sort of, you know, put them in separate variables, and then combine them later on. So at that point, you sort of you know what you're dealing with. So okay, I took the 3 shapes here. And instead of having them like as 3 variables, they're now like 3 indexes in this one array. So instead of shape 1, I can refer to this one as shapes with the index of 0 because that's 0 is the first index in your array. So shape 1 is actually shapes 0, and shape 2 is shapes 1. So okay, so I'm just going to pull them out because I don't need them anymore.
Okay.
And because I want to iterate through these arrays, like from one to the next, I'm going to create a counter here. I'm going to call it shape number. I'm going to start at 0, and this is going to keep track of where we are in this array. So we're starting with instead of shape 1 here, this is now called shapes 0 because I've put it in here. And we've got the shape, we're starting with shape number 0. When we call this tween polygon function, we actually want to get the next shape in the array. So we've got this shape number, we know we're at 0. I'm going to increase it by 1, so I'm just going to go shape number plus plus, and that is equal to, that pass through shape number equals shape number plus 1. So I've increased shape number from 0 to 1. And then I'm going to create the points from our new shape, which is shapes shape number. because I've just increased it to 1, so that this evaluates to shapes 1. And then I'm going to tween from the polygon object to the new points. And it's erroring out. I've done something wrong, so because it's not doing anything. So I'm just going to open this up in debug and see what is going on. Shape 1 is not defined. So I've still got a reference to shape 1 in here somewhere. I'm just going to search for it. Oh, okay. All right. Yep. All right. I need to let's. Okay. Oh, okay. Yep. All right. That's why. I'm still using shape 1 as a reference for the length of our points string, which so that's why that was erroring. I just need to pass in shape 0 instead of shape 1. So we're back to where we were before, which is twinning from one shape to the other. But now, because we've created this sort of array and the ability to move through it, I can now call this tween polygon function again once this tween has finished. And how we do that is actually using a property in this tweenlight function called onComplete, and you can pass in a function that runs when the tween has finished completing. And I think, okay, this is like one thing that's like a little bit, I think is a little bit gnarly about Greensock, is like in this object, you pass in the objects you want to tween these, the properties you want to tween this object to, but you also pass in all these other random properties like onComplete. So I actually have to modify this object to add an onComplete function. And what that function will be is tween polygon. I'm just going to recall this function. So it moves on to the next shape when it's finished tweening. So it will call this function, and then when it's complete, it will actually just recall itself again. And it's tried to do that, but it's run into an error here, because if I just keep increasing the shape number, it's just going to go 0, 1, 2, 3, and eventually I'm going to run out of shapes here. It's going to error out.
So you need to loop back to 0?
Yes, so I need to check if, so, yep, if, so I'll say here I've increased it, and I'm just going to check if it's greater than 2, because that means it's it's moved past shape 3 here, because shape 3's index is actually 2. So I just check if it's greater than 2, and then if that's the case, I reset it back to 0. So that's working well. This shape looks real funky right now, the third one. It goes 0, 1, 2, like this. And that one's weird. And that's because these two shapes have the same number of points to tween between. This shape has less points. So it's kind of like just leaving these extra points where they are and not moving them, which doesn't look great. And it just so happens that these two shapes are like double the size of this array. So what I'm going to do is just double up each of these points like this. So they each occur twice.
So you want the same amount
of values?
Yeah, so
between
each
shape?
each of these shapes are made up of points. And if you want to like move those points, you probably want them to be like the same number of points in each shape, just to sort of make that like neat, sort of make that transition sort of more neat between each one, without getting that weird overlapping lines. Because if you don't pass in points in this shape to account for all of the points in this shape, the second half of these points are going to just be left alone and not updated, which means they're just still sitting there from the last shape and they're not moving. So what we need is to put in some points to like force that tween and override these values. And so I've just sort of doubled up in this shape here. So I've got 2 for every point instead of 1, and that means all of these points will be morphed. We haven't got any like lingering old points from the old shapes in here because they all have the same number of points, and all of the points are being taken care of on each tween.
So that's
So now
pretty much. So
Yep.
that's pretty much designing in JavaScript, because that's a design design, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's like I'm still not 100% happy with how this shape moves from the A to the D sort of shape. I'm like that's a bit awkward. I'll leave it for now, but it's just one of those things, like especially with animating SVG paths, which is sort of like the theme for today, is it can, you can sort of mess around with these coordinates and sort of make something that you think looks better or like is a nicer animation. And that's sort of like what I'll spend a bit of time doing normally, is like just keep like moving these points around until I kind of like the final effect. And now because you have this array here, you can just change these, like you can change these numbers to whatever you want, and it's it's probably gonna do something crazy here, but yeah, like that. But you can sort of fiddle with this and then put it in a place where you really like the effect. So now we've got, this is like the basic effect that I want. It's like 3 shapes tweening to each other. So I'm happy with that, and I've got like the JavaScript working how I want. So now I'm going to pay a bit of attention to the design of how this thing looks.
So you're going to talk about the tweening part of it? I mean, not the tweening, the easing?
Yeah, so I'll get to that. This point I'm like, oh, it's just a red shape and I don't like it. So I'm usually just take a sec now to make it look how I want. So I'm just going to set body there first. I'm just going to set like, I'm always like partial to not quite black but almost black backgrounds. And what I want in my design is, I don't know if you noticed the final design, I don't just like want one color, I want multiple colors tweening here. So I'm actually going to need 3 polygons here instead of just the 1. But they're all doing very similar things. Like they're all moving the same way. Their timing is just slightly offset. So I'm going to add 2 more polygons in here. Only the first one you'll be able to see because the other 2 don't have points yet. We need to give them points in the JavaScript. I'm going to pick 3 colors for them. So pretty much all the time when I'm looking for colors for CodePens, I usually go to this site called coolers.co /app, and I just like pick like, I'm like, oh, I like this purple, I'm going to lock this one because I like that color, and I'll just keep like hitting space until I see. Yeah,
I use that tool all the time.
Yeah, it's like
just
my
fantastic.
favorite. Yeah, it's my favorite sort of color, like combination making tool. My other favorite color one is, if I just want to pick one color, I go to 0 to 255.com, and I usually go to this random color grid, and I just pick one that I like the look of. And that's what I do for one-off colors. Like, oh, I need just one color. I just pick one that looks nice here.
What is that site?
It's 02255.com. The idea is like when you pick, so this cool thing about this site is say you pick a color, or you can hand it a color, it will give you just several shades of that color mixed from light to dark. So it's really cool. It's really good for like if you don't want to go to Photoshop to like figure out darker or lighter shades of a particular value, you can use this site for that. So I'll often come here just for this grid to pick. I just like, oh, I like this pink here, and I'll just use that. But if I want like multiple colors, I'll come to this side. So I'm gonna pick. I don't like that.
So your favorite color is purple, huh?
Yeah. Have you noticed? I want like an orangey.
That's the color of royalty.
Yeah, it's true. All right, I'm just gonna. This will do for now. I'm not 100% happy with this, but it's okay. So I'm gonna take these three colors now, and I'm just gonna set them as the fill on each of these polygons.
Now, as a side note, for everybody in the Hangout, the colors that appear in the coolors.co app, all those colors are within our color scheme. They are related to each other. Yeah, harmonious.
Yeah.
So just so you know that whatever colors come out of that, you're in a good spot design-wise.
Yeah, they'll generally look good together, like they,
Yeah. What was that?
So like when you hit space,
yeah,
like it looks at the ones you've chosen and then it finds ones that
match. And you can lock the ones you want and flip them around.
Yeah.
You press the button, it gives you. I've used this all the time, and it's
so useful.
That's a more hardcore. It's pretty cool too, but yeah, cooler.
Search for cooler.
So you're gonna make the letters different colors?
Yeah. So I've got each shape is going to be a different color. We can only see one right now because we're only animating one. So what I actually need here is 3 polygons, not just this polygon here. So instead of selecting this one by its ID, I'm going to give them all the same class name, which will be polygon.
What?
Or attributes to person.
Oh yeah, you can select different fonts for your editor within CodePen. I don't know if that's a pro feature or
it's anyone. It's free. Anybody can do it.
So free account too.
She's got sassy
Yeah.
Yeah. The script font.
This is the operator mono. It's just in your account settings. Like you can change your editor settings. You can choose operator mono as your font, and then you'll get this fancy font, which I'm like totally obsessed with.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty readable for a script font for sure.
yeah, it's cool. I mean, some people are like, I don't like the script, but I really like it. So instead of selecting like one polygon with the ID, I'm going to select all 3 of these polygons with get elements by class name. And what that does is returns an array of these 3 items. So now I have this array where I was like referring to the polygon object in my where was I doing this again? It was setting the attribute here on this polygon. I can go pass in polygon 0, and it's going to be doing it to the same element, except I've done something weird. Debug. Oh, I think I need a capitalized N here.
You know what? I was going to say something, but I thought I'm not a JS guy. I'm not even going to mention anything. But
no,
okay.
you're right. Yeah, camel case.
I don't come on top.
Yes.
So instead of tweening just this one shape, I actually now want to tween all 3 of these polygons. So I want to be able to write the string to each of these polygons at the moment I sort of have to change this in here because what we're doing in this function right now is writing to polygons, the first polygon every time. But we want to be able to like write it to any of the polygons that we want. So instead we're going to pass in the I want to write it to the HTML element, sorry, we want to write it to. So I'm just going to call it element. And we also want to pass in the polygon object we're going to refer to here. Because until now we've been dealing with one polygon object that handles the points of the one polygon, but we actually need to have 3 polygon objects to take care of 3 elements because we're going to tween those at different rates. So I'm just going to break things here now by doing this. But instead of writing to just this one polygon with the global polygon object, we're going to pass in a local polygon object that we can refer to here and set the function here. So this create polygon points, if I were to pass in polygon 0 and our global polygon object, it should start doing it again because I passed in a element to write to and the object I want to use. But we want to use 3 separate polygon objects here. So what we want to do is instead of using just one polygon object, I'm going to make this an array of 3 polygon objects, another array here. And in our tween polygon function, we're not just going to tween one object at a time, we're going to tween all 3. So I'm going to create another array here. Oh no. It's the CodePen loop stuck.
Is CodePen freezing for you there?
Yeah. It's because I did a loop and it's freaking out. Alright, cool. I'm just gonna up in a new tab. That tab is lost to us forever. Come on.
Come on, CodePen.
Does anyone remember how to, I should know this, but I can never remember off the top of my head, like stop the JavaScript from executing in a CodePen tab?
You can kill the process with the activity monitor, but that's not JavaScript, that's the whole process.
There's like something you can, this almost never happens to me.
Can you reload the tab since you haven't saved the pen? It'll load the last version of it?
I think it's saved in this state where it's like, somebody posted it, this is, somebody posted it recently in the repo. Just remember the last place I remember storing it.
Wait, but you can kill the tab. Well,
yeah.
With that process, kill the tab in Chrome.
I think the problem is that like I've saved it in this state, so now every time I try and load it, it's gonna do this.
Right, it's gonna load
yeah,
that
so that what you can do is actually like pass in turn off JS equals true, which is what I could not remember. And it won't like execute the JavaScript.
Wow.
Which is
wow, that's pretty cool.
yeah, so that's great because now I can find where it freaked out. Why? Oh, here we go. Yeah, it's saved like this, which is like infinite loop time.
Can you post a link to that GitHub issue there on Slack?
You know what? It should come up when you Google it. Something I'm like, I feel like we need to document it better. Well, it doesn't. That's the frustrating thing. Like, as in, when you Google this, it doesn't show up. I need to look into why our docs. But we do have it documented. So I don't know why. I don't know where that is in the docs right now, which is pretty bad form. I'm trying to find where.
Wasn't it right there? Hold on. I think I've seen it. It was a 4.
So weird.
It was a 4 something.
Yeah, very.
Does it?
Anyway, this is just like resolved itself. I don't know what was going on there. I'm just going to open this in. Okay. It's not freaking out here. Try doing this again.
Is it working on debug mode? But not
yeah,
in the
it is. Yeah, it was just. I think it's because I ran it like just with don't execute JavaScript. It sort of wasn't running. So, but I'm find why it was even like in a like permanent loop, so I'm not sure what was going on there. But anyway, I'm gonna try this again. So what? Now I'm like scared to.
You might want to start with a comment there.
So let's. Okay, I'm gonna. For. No! It's doing it again!
Okay, line something, tween polygon. That's the... Did it again?
Yeah, it's just... Yeah. How do I kill this tab press? Here we go.
Oh.
Force.
Yeah. The way that I know is you go in Activity Monitor and then you find one that's using up all of your RAM, and then that's the one that's usually.
Because like.
How do you go to that? How do you go to the Activity Monitor?
It's built into your Mac. Yeah.
I thought it was a Chrome thing.
Multiple instances for the tab.
Yeah, every
Right. You know how in Windows you have your process.
You need the Mac version of the.
There's one for Chrome with all its tabs. Chris Coyer posted something about that.
I'm just gonna switch auto run off so it does not do this to me. Okay. So I've turned off auto run. So now I can type this loop without freaking out. Yeah, that's something like I like coding with auto run on all the time, but when you're dealing with loops, sometimes it's just locks up when you're in the middle of typing a loop, so you just have to switch off. So I'm going to go through these polygon objects here and create the new points for them to tween to, and I'm going to tween those objects. So instead of doing this for the one shape or the one polygon, I'm going to do it for each of the polygons. So I'm going to call this polygon objects I, because we're going from 0 to 2 through these 3 objects, and we're going to tween them. And we only want this onComplete callback to happen because when it's like, we only want it to happen like once per times this run. If I were to use this onComplete on each of these, it would call it 3 times, which is not what we want. We only want it to call it once, because we only need to run this function once each time, and it will run this tween 3 times. So I'm just going to say if I is equal to 0, then we do the onComplete function, which means it's only going to call this one once. So save that, and it's probably not going to work because we need to set up all 3 of our polygons, like we did with the first one. So I'm just going to go polygon objects 0 equals create polygon object shapes like this. And I'm going to do it for each of our polygons. And with our update function in the animate, we also need to do this for all 3 of our polygon elements. So I'm just going to call it on all 3 of these. See if that does its thing. I'm going to check the JavaScript errors. Polygon object's not defined. I'm still referring to it somewhere in here.
Does it not say the line?
That's what I've done here. Alright, so yeah, I called it polygon object, but it's objects because it's an array.
Yeah, I was going to say polygon objects do not care.
So all 3 of these objects are moving, but because they're moving at exactly the same time, we can't see the ones behind. They're like all moving behind each other. So I want to set a delay on this tween function here, depending on the number object it is. So I've added an onComplete function here just for 1, but for all 3, I want to add a delay, which is just going to be the index times some sort of number. So I'm just going to say 0.1 seconds here. And that is not doing what I would expect. I'm just going to check whether these elements are updating here. Okay, they're not. I'm still only writing to the 1 here. So where is our write function? Oh, here. Right, okay. Still over and over again. And missing, I didn't actually pass in these other 2 elements. So now it should be writing to all 3 of them. Awesome. I'm just going to take this stroke off because I like it better without the stroke. And I'm just, actually we don't even need that fill anymore. So we're tweening all 3, and we've got a sort of staggered effect to the colors. And this is when like animation timing comes in, because if you'll notice this shape here, actually I'm just going to stick this in the center. SVG left 20%. Negative, how wide is it? 240. Yeah, I'm just going to move this closer to the center. So this is using linear timing right now, which it looks okay, but it's just not as nice as it could be, which is why I'll bring easing into this animation. And what I'll usually, so the rule I use for easing, if you're like new to easing and there's basically easing is just an animation timing function. So GreenSock actually has like a ease visualizer.
One in CSS.
Yeah.
Because she's doing it.
So ease is just like a timing function that you can pass in to this function, which will control like how it animates. And that's why I included that easing pack from the external libraries, is because I want to use one of these eases in here. And basically what we're seeing here is like for example, a power to ease out. So you have easing out, which goes really fast to slow. Easing in, which does the opposite. It goes from slow to fast movement. And then you have ease in and out, which does this like slow, fast, slow thing. And when I'm choosing easing stuff, my usual rule of thumb is if you're moving something into the view from outside of it, I use an ease out. So it's kind of weird because it's like if you're moving in, you ease out. It's like opposites. But if you're moving something into view, you go really fast to slow. If you're moving something out of view, you go from slow to fast. And then if you're moving something from one point to another, like I am here in the case of these points, I use the ease in out, because that's the best one to move from point A to point B that's on your stage. You want it to go slow and then fast and then slow, so you don't have this like sort of staggering starting and stopping motion. So yeah, I'm going to pass.
I was just saying, it's more organic.
Yes, exactly. That's what you want. You want organic. You don't want things just like quickly starting to move out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
That's not how things work in real life. They sort of like accelerate and then they sort of like slow down to a stop. So I'm just going to put this as a ease property. Let me just double check that. It's called ease. Yeah, okay, ease. And I'm going to, so I'll just like try a few different ones. So I'll like try like, so this one, this power one is kind of like a very subtle timing function. I did that wrong. It's not liking that. Oh, I need the number. Okay.
Yeah.
So.
No, go ahead.
That's like a bit better, but it's still kind of too subtle. I want it to like be more, you know, there's more of an ease feeling. So you could try, you know, something kind of like extreme, like this circ is a very like extreme ease. So just throw that in and see what that looks like. And that's like very sort of like snappy. It's almost too much dramatic, like between the speeds. So I probably want something like in between that. And this is sort of like where you know, you can have a lot of fun. You just try different eases and you sort of like see what you think looks better. And you know, it can be a personal preference thing. It's not like, oh, there's one right timing function for this stuff. Like, I feel like it's just like whatever you think looks good. So I'm going to put in a power 3 here. And that's probably more of a middle ground, which I quite like the look of. It sort of like looks smooth. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Like, that's our sort of like animation here with the 3 shapes done. And you can like you know, mess around with the timing, or you know, you could make the delay different, or make the easing different, or make it happen like really fast or slow. Like, I've just changed the tween time from 1 to 2 seconds here, which is sort of will slow it right down, you know. So, you know, you could make this staggering, like quite increase the time between the staggers, so it's kind of like a little bit more obvious between the colors, like that. So this is like the, you know, this is the fun part. Once you set this up, you can mess around with these numbers here, the delay or the easing function or the timing, until you know, you have something you really like the look of. And yeah, that's it. Another thing one thing I noticed about this particular design is that I don't like it how the A goes from the A to the D shape, so I'd probably look at choosing like a different shape for that third one, like just until I was happy with it. That's just like a design preference thing. Some people might think that looks fine, but I just think it could be better. So I won't do that now, but that's something I'd probably go ahead and do later on before I publish it. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Oh, that's awesome, Rach. Really, really cool. You guys like that stuff? Yeah. Pretty. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, seeing you go through your code and like, okay, so how do you solve? You don't know where a problem is. On C, you go to the console. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, that's how I'm gonna do it from now on. Yeah. That's pretty cool. Really,
I mean,
really nice.
because I coded this one last night just to like make sure I knew what I'd be doing today. I didn't really run into a lot of JavaScript errors, but normally when I'm doing this stuff, like, I'll spend so much time in debug just like seeing like what I did wrong in the JavaScript console, like half the time. But because I just run into errors constantly and just fix them. Because I did this last night and it's very fresh in my mind, I sort of like didn't run into many errors, but in real life like that, I run into errors like constantly. So please don't think I just sit here and like code things and it's like perfect and I'm just like, oh, it works like every time I type out a line of code, because that like never happens. It's like I always get it wrong and I have to fix it. So that's sort of like more realistic.
Yeah, you're gonna make this pen public so we can check it out, right?
Oh yeah, for sure, yeah.
Well, actually, I think you can share the URL, and even though it's private, we can still access it.
Yeah, I'll share the private one right now, and then I'll probably just like neat it up a little so it's like perfectly centered, because I'm just like that, you know, like this is kind of sitting off left. I just want remove this text and like make it sit in the center of the screen, and I might even change this background to like something that's not black but like a really dark purple, just so it matches these colors in here.
Yeah.
You know, just like do a little polish before I publish it, but I'll put this in the chat right now so you can.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, because in the Hangouts we don't see it as smooth as you there, but
probably because the frame rate like the.
Oh well, that's a major difference. from the Hangout to live in your machine.
Yeah.
That's so cool. I wanted to ask you, what about frames per second? Is that something that you could control, or?
Frames per second comes down to when we use this request animation frame function here, which is we're just calling animate and then using request animation frame, which is built into the browser to animate over and over again. This one is like attempts to give you 60 frames per second, but it can only do that to a point, and the ability of it to do that will depend on what you're doing in this function here. So all I'm doing right now for this one is updating 3 polygons in SVG. So most machines, maybe on mobile, will struggle a little bit. You should get 60 frames per second. But if I were to do something like try to update, say, like 30 polygons, it might start slowing down because the browser has to render like 30 elements instead of just 3. So it's like the more work you give the function, give the browser to do in this function, like the slower your frame rate will get. So the best way to keep your frames snappy is to try to like limit the amount of work the browser has to do like within this function here.
Okay. Another question I have is any of this, well, just to kind of give a little background of where my question is coming from. When it comes to CSS animations, using transforms is the recommended way to move things around, shape things, especially when repainting happens. And that is because when you use transforms, it's said that the process is moved to the GPU, which is the graphics card of the device or the machine, whatever.
Yep.
With that being said, is any of this process that you showed us here being done on the GPU, or is this done on the CPU?
This is done on the CPU.
Is there anything you can do to move it over to the GPU for improved performance if you have this on a page and whatever? I don't know, I'm just saying.
Yeah, not really, because and this is why. So basically the way GPU accelerated animations work is that you can, in the DOM, you can sort of like say create an element, for example, 1 polygon, and you could basically that, like a bitmap of that shape gets uploaded to the GPU. And then if you were to do something like translate it with CSS, the shape itself hasn't changed. Just the position of the shape has changed, which means that the browser's GPU can do all of the calculations for that shape because it already has the bitmap of that shape like cached in its memory, and it can do that shift. But what we're doing here is we're drawing a new shape every time, like on every frame. And that's like how you achieve this morphing effect. And because we're doing that, we're updating the shape, the browser has to repaint that layer over and over again. It can't rely on the GPU to sort of cache it and do something with it. So you can't hardware accelerate this particular animation because that is the nature of the animation. You achieve this effect by constantly updating the shape within here, and because you're constantly updating the shape, the browser will constantly have to paint that shape over and over again.
So the DOM is constantly being updated is what it is?
Yes. Yeah. The DOM's being updated, and specifically like contents of this element is being updated. You can only hardware accelerate by taking, say, an entire element and doing something like transforming it with CSS, because then the browser doesn't need to change the the image within that element. It's just shifting it around or scaling it up and down or you know, fading it. So yeah, that's sort of the way hardware acceleration works. It relies on it taking like a snapshot of an element and being able to manipulate that. And as soon as you change the markup of that element, it's not going to be able to do that. It has to repaint it.
Okay.
Which is why you know, SVG animation is like pretty cool, but you also have to be pretty like this sort of SVG animation is. You just have to be restrained with it, you know? Like it works well with just 3, but if you try to do this with like, you know, 50 elements, it would be like, the browser would be like, what are you doing to me, you know? So you can do cool stuff with it, but you have to like restrain yourself from going overboard because you can't hardware accelerate SVG like that.
Okay. That's cool. Does anybody have any questions?
You get some questions in the Google Doc.
Where is
I
it?
got a question.
Yeah, sure.
So, I was working on a little project where I was trying to bounce a ball, do just a little bouncing animation, and I was thinking when you were talking keep on and, you know, having like speed.
Sorry, I just like lost.
Okay.
You ask that again. Sorry.
Sure. So I'm working on a little project where I'm trying to make an animation where I'm bouncing the ball, and I was just working on that today, and I didn't end up using a tweening library. I wasn't really familiar with tweening. So my question for you is, when do you decide to use tweening versus just managing like the speed and the time in the JavaScript?
I usually go for a tweening library when I know I want to usually do like more than one tween. Mm-hmm. And I also do it when I want to like because I'm very familiar with this tweening library, and so for me to make a tween happen, it's very quick for me because I just include tween light and I'm done with it. That's why I'll often lead towards the tweening library, and that's with like these specific animations that go from one point to the other, have a time function on them. That's sort of like, I'm like, oh, I want to tween for that. But if I want to make an animation that involves like something like constantly moving at a normal rate, like at a speed. So say I'm doing something with like physics where I'm like, oh, I just want this item to move at a constant velocity of, you know, 10 pixels per second. I don't need a tween for that. I just, you know, do that with my own JavaScript kind of thing. So when I want to be like very prescriptive, like I want this thing to move here and this thing to move here, and I want them to have special times and different eases, and then the library comes in because you can just control it a lot easier that way.
Okay. And with GreenSock, can you talk just a little bit about different GreenSock tools? I'm not sure if anybody else is familiar with them, but I'm not too familiar with them. Just what are the options there, and what do they provide?
So GreenSock stuff is pretty comprehensive. They have paid products as well, like paid license products as well as free. And basically they have a couple of different things. They have the Tween Lite, which is what I use pretty much all the time. It like that one's free and it covers all of your basic tweening needs. They have another more comprehensive tweening library called Tween Max, which will give you lots of different options, like the ability to do fancy stuff like reverse your tweens, you can do special stuff with SVG. They actually have like a function in there that lets you, but like what I did today was kind of like the do-it-yourself tweening between SVG shapes, but they have a plugin that lets you just hand it like any SVG shape and it will tween to another shape. But that stuff's like on a paid license, so you know, I don't really use it very often. They also have timeline libraries, which allows you, sort of like anyone who's done Flash before would be familiar with the timeline, which is like the concept that you have like a timeline that you can stage any number of tweens on, and it will run to this like comprehensive timeline. So you can animate like an entire scene with like several different steps in it and use this timeline to do it. So they also have libraries that help with that, which are also called Timeline Lite and Timeline Max. So they have a lot of good libraries, especially if you're like animating very complicated scenes. But I mean, I reach for the Tween Lite almost all the time because I don't do any sort of like intensive animation that involves like big scenes or whatever. And there, there's a lot of tweening libraries also that aren't green sock that you could use for simple tweens. If you just like Google JavaScript tweening library, like the whole first page of Google comes up with like a bunch of stuff on GitHub, and any of them, they all do the same thing basically. They all like allow you just to like tween object properties and pass in a timing function. So you don't even have to use the green sock one. I just use it because it's got the CDN there and it's quick for me to grab.
Anybody else has any other questions?
Why she's using Tim Curry on it.
Ah. Hold on.
Your parent got Tim Curry's.
Oh, you're cutting out, sorry.
I didn't
On your CodePen, you get a banner of Tim Curry, and why you chose Tim Curry to splash all over your banner?
I just really like Tim Curry. Like, I don't know. There's no real backstory to that except that I just like, he's my favorite actor in the whole world / celebrity person. So my Twitter background is also Tim Curry. Like, I just love Tim Curry. So I made a pen where you can like paint his face like that, and that's where the background comes from, basically.
Does that mean you're a Rocky Horror fan?
Yes. Big time.
All right. What are you watching?
So here's a question for you. The animation you're working on tonight was only like sharp angles. How does this work with shapes that have and SVGs that have curves? And, I mean, does that work well, or is that a whole other kind of ball of wax?
You can do the same thing with curves. You just if you're doing it yourself, you are limited to tweening the same kind of curve. So, like, say, one quadratic Bezier curve or something from one spot to the other. And I actually wrote a post about how you could do that. I can like post that in the chat. But doing any sort of complicated objects that involve like lots of different curves and sort of like any kind of non-angular shape. It's very difficult to do the maths for that yourself. And figure out those points. So that's sort of like where you would bring in something like GreenSock has that as a plugin as one of their offerings, but I think it's on a paid license. But because it is kind of complicated to do, but you can just pass in any SVG shape with like any curves in it, and it will like morph from one to the other. But to do that yourself would be very difficult.
Cool. Thank you.
All righty. Well, if no one else has any more questions, I think that's it, Rach. This was awesome. Thanks again for showing us how you do your magic. It was very enlightening. For sure.
Oh, that's good. I'm glad.
Yeah, it's a very great session. That's for sure.
If anyone has like other questions, just put them in the chat, and I'll answer them.
Sounds great. Alrighty. So we'll let you go back to your LA weather.
Thank you.
We're going to enjoy our Ohio weather for now. Well, thanks again.
Thank you.
All right. See ya. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Until next time.
That was cool.
There you go.